That's Nick.
And that's Joseph, and today we're here to talk about How to Fix a Drug Scandal, which is available on Netflix as of April 1st, 2020.
It's a 4-part docuseries.
Correct. Directed by Erin Lee Carr. She's directed quite a few documentaries. Dirty Money. I think we were both fans of Mommy Dead and Dearest.
Yes.
Which I believe was... there's also a version of that starring Patricia Arquette called The Act. Yeah.
This docuseries revolves around 2 drug lab chemists in Massachusetts whose work, so their drug certifications, were under question because of their actions, which ultimately affected the cases of tens of thousands of people in Massachusetts.
Correct.
Like drug convictions.
Correct.
So the 2 main people this documentary focuses on are...
Annie Dookhan, who was the one that was caught in the Boston lab. She was caught first in like 2012.
Annie Dookhan.
And then Sonja Farak, who was caught in 2013. Farak kind of takes the brunt of the attention in here because she was...
Well, so they have 2 very different...
reasons for why they were caught, what they were doing, sure.
So let's quickly explain. So Sonja Farak is like a straight up crackhead. Yeah. Like was freebasing in the crime lab. I would say probably the most fascinating part of the documentary is the transcripts of her describing her behavior in the lab. Like how she started stealing drugs from the crime lab, using the drugs in the crime lab. So because she was under the influence, all of her drug certifications were under question. And then Annie Dookhan was like this first generation American from somewhere. It's not clear where she's from, it doesn't matter. But she was really striving to be like the best she could be. So she was essentially like falsifying drug certificates.
She wasn't doing all the testing.
She wasn't doing the proper testing so that she could like produce way more than her colleagues to get like attention. But she also was like pretending to be like a Harvard graduate and sending emails under fake names to try to get the attention of prosecutors. And she was kind of like kind of in cahoots with some of the prosecutors, which seems really it is extremely unethical and uncomfortable.
Conflicts of interest.
Conflicts of interest. So in her case, all of the people who were convicted under her certifications, their charges were dropped, which was in the tens of thousands.
Yeah, I think all told it was over 35,000-ish people that were released or had reduced charges based on these women's actions.
So the 4 parts together total a little more than 3 hours. I think it's too long. I think it could have been 90 minutes. What they end up telling us, because the entire time we're thinking, the focus of the documentary really is, will the district attorney's office in these 2 counties in Massachusetts like drop the charges for all these convicted people? So it just builds up to that very slowly. There isn't a lot of payoff.
There isn't a lot of payoff, and there's not really a human component we can latch onto in this. They do spend a lot of time. So there's this defense attorney who's kind of the one who's responsible for breaking the case, so to speak, Luke Ryan, because Sonja Farak, when her car was finally searched, a bunch of documents were taken out of it and called assorted lab, what was the word for it?
Yeah, assorted lab paperwork.
Yeah, and he had to valiantly struggle against the Attorney General to finally have access to those paperworks, which exonerated a lot of his clients.
Because ultimately, the fact that the district attorney's office, they deliberately hid those papers because it showed that she was a crackhead for like the entire time she worked in the lab. And they didn't want the ramifications of that to like take its full form.
Right.
Yeah.
So they focused a lot on Luke Ryan and one of his clients who overdosed, Rafael Rodriguez. And you can see that there's this struggle to get into that human component, but it doesn't ever quite work because this is more of about a systemic issue.
So there are a lot of things going on because I think, you know, from the first episode, my first thought was, okay, so all these people who were convicted, what's their story? How did this affect their lives? And we really only focus on 3 people, like you said, but there are tens of thousands of people who are affected. So I was very unsatisfied not getting a better understanding of the scope of all of the people who were affected, because I think in the 4 parts that I don't think were well utilized, like the time, they are trying to balance like the systemic issue, because like the drug lab that Sonja Farak worked in, they make it sound like it was some old dirty kitchen in a basement somewhere with no supervision, no camera, no protocol, no checks and balances. And this bitch is down there smoking crack,
cooking crack, and
literally making crack, cooking it, smoking it. And this same person is like signing certificates that are ultimately putting people in jail. So there's that. Like that could have been its own documentary of how that's even possible. Like all the drug labs in this country, it makes me wonder, like, what are the conditions? Yeah.
And then, of course, in the Attorney General's office, Ann Kaczmarek and Kris Foster, which will make your blood boil watching these fucking women and how they hid things, and then were never charged with anything.
Because they're most concerned with... So the one district attorney... Because the 2 counties, the Sonja Farak County and the Annie Dookhan County... The Sonja Farak County, they were a little more sort of like, something wrong is happening, we should figure it out, versus in the Boston County, whatever it's called, Suffolk or whatever, the 2 prosecutors you said, they were trying to like cover it up so it wouldn't get too big. But the one statement one of the attorneys in the documentary makes is that their job is to find the truth, not try to like... minimize the damage. And I think that's another thing that this documentary could have focused on more. Like it really was trying to do too much in the 4 parts that ultimately felt like too long anyway.
In Farak's testimony, so it's told through reenactment, which I think was also kind of a mistake. Farak couldn't be part of this. She did speak with the filmmaker, but there's an ongoing civil case, so she didn't appear on film.
But her mom and her sister do.
Yes, so there is an actress standing in to read out her testimony,
which I really don't like. I don't like dramatizations, and the actor, bless her heart for getting work, but I don't think she was very good.
No.
It just seemed really, I don't know, like a Lifetime.
I almost wish they could have just had Sonja Farak read out loud, like tape record herself saying those things for them, but whatever.
Sure.
It's... Oh, and then there are other things, like there are moments in this that are very effective, such as when it was going to be clear that lots of these people were going to be released based on the actions of these women, how the media portrayed what was going to happen, like thousands of these
they show violent criminals.
They show like
mostly
pictures,
brown people,
like black men's mugshots that are just like
to scare the community into like saying no, we shouldn't drop these charges. But then it's only really like one small portion. So I feel like that could have been an entire thing of like how like the marketing of criminals and how we keep people imprisoned. There's so many like really interesting topics that could have been developed more, but this documentary doesn't do a good job of developing any of them. I did really admire the lawyer, Luke Ryan. I was going to say Jeff Lowe from Tiger King. Luke Ryan, and then the gentleman from the ACLU.
Matt Segal, I think?
Yes, that's him. So, really admirable people who, it's nice seeing people who end up going into law who really just want to like do good. So that was refreshing, but yeah, I think it's just like this documentary is capitalizing on all the other Netflix docuseries that have become so popular.
Sure, there are important things here.
There are, but it's not on the level of like Making of a like if you're thinking it's like Making of a Murderer, Tiger King, Don't Fuck with Cats. It's nothing like that.
No, but we all can't be winners.
No, it's pretty dry.
It is a little dry. That said, though, there are still things that can be gleaned and learned from this, and you can learn about like the bench chemists and kind of some procedure here.
It's informative.
Yeah.
I mean, I watched all 4 in one sitting, and I was engaged.
It's also really about questions of privilege and questioning those in authority, because these women weren't questioned. Like, why wasn't the people that were the accused had the right to question these women and their the tests they ran, but nobody does that. I don't know. How there was no system of checks and balances. The people handling the drugs aren't tested for drugs. In her case.
Yeah, there are a lot of topics that I would have liked more information on, but overall, I would give this documentary 2.5 out of 5 stars.
Yeah, I think 2.5 is fair. I think it's definitely worth a watch.
There are some WTF moments.
Yes, for sure. Yeah,
but again, particularly listening to Sonja Farak's testimony about her drug abuse, which is not funny. This person has a very serious issue, and I think it's a nice contrast. Not nice contrast, but it's an interesting contrast between Sonja Farak's issue and Annie Dookhan's issue. Mm-hmm. So anyway, what would you, or do you have anything else?
No, that's it.
All right, toodaloo.
Thanks.